Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Diary of a Lawyer. And just briefly want to discuss the law that prevents the return of the artifacts kept in the British Museum, such as the Parthenon, the Benin bronzes, among others. And this follows the apparent thefts at the British Museum of artifacts that were kept there. Now, for some time, for many years, there have been calls for many of these artifacts, pieces, to be returned to their original um, countries where they were, in most cases, stolen or looted, and in some cases, after the use of violence on the local population. Some of this was during colonialism and other ventures. And so, one of the arguments that was always put forward is that, well, these artifacts are safe here for everyone to see, and we are not convinced that they will be safe if they're returned wherever they were taken from. Now, that's sort of a defective argument, especially has always been defective, but it's even come under more scrutiny following the thefts of the artifacts from the British Museum that have come to light in the last few weeks. And after that, the chair of the Parliamentary Reparation groups has hit out at the law preventing the return of Parthenon marbles and Benin bronzes. The MP who has said that the suspected thefts at the British Museum have exposed the quote-unquote insulting ridiculousness of its refusal to return contested artifacts to their country of origin on security grounds. Barry Baylor Addy, the chair of the All-Parliamentary Group on African Reparations, believed the 1960 law preventing the return of objects such as Parthenon marbles and the Benin bronzes should be changed. And one of the most insulting reasons that they have given is that the other countries that these items belong to would either not be able to take care of them, or they're likely to be stolen, she said. But you have got people in this country putting them on eBay, she's quoted as saying. And the museum has been at the center of an escalating storm that followed the resignation of its director, Hartwig Fischer, a week ago, following the revelation that as many as 2,000 items from the museum collection had been found to be missing, stolen, or damaged, and the police were investigating. Fischer has said he accepted responsibility for the museum's failure to properly respond to warnings in 2021 about the suspected theft of objects. Museum's Deputy Director, Jonathan Williams, has stepped back from his normal duties until an independent review into the suspected theft has concluded. George Osborne, the former Conservative Chancellor who chairs the Museum Board of Trustees, said groupthink may have prevented leadership from believing that treasures have been taken. He told the BBC Radio's program that it was a mess that would be cleared up. He is quoted as saying that it's certainly been damaging to the British Museum reputation. I think that's sort of stating the obvious, and that's why I'm apologizing on behalf of the museum. We want them to say that they believe that they've been victims of theft over a long period of time, and frankly, more could have been done to prevent them. He did point out that one silver lining to dark cloud was that the museum had begun to recover some of the stolen items. which he described as small items of jewelry, gems, bits of gold that were not on public display. And the turmoil has given fresh momentum to calls for some of the museum's celebrated and looted objects to be returned to their original homes. Rebello Adi, the Labour MP for Streatham, said what makes it more awkward is that they have been so lax about the suspected theft of other people's items that they haven't even bothered to assess what it is that they have to know exactly what has been stolen. Osborne said the museum was working with the Art Loss Register and members of the antiquarian community to return the missing items, and security has been stepped up around museum storerooms. Professor Dan Hackins, the author of the Brutish Museum, which is Brutish Museum, SH, which examined the looting of the Benin bronzes by British soldiers in the late 19th century, said the suspected thefts should prompt a change in the British Museum's quote-unquote imperious stance of being the custodian of the world's heritage. And what we're seeing is another sudden incident in the slow-motion car crash of the Victorian model of curation that we've been seeing going on at the British Museum, said the curator of wild archaeology at Oxford University's Museum. He went on to say that the model has to be understood as something which was about a lack of transparency, arguing that the British Museum and some other UK national museums are still clinging to the imperial nostalgia of having some God-given entitlement to hold on to these objects and not to tell you about it. And Fisher is staying on until an interim director is appointed, which could probably come by the end of the week or so. Now, a British Museum spokesperson said that they have partnerships with museums and communities around the world, and they lend more than 4,000 objects annually. And they're dedicated to making their collection as accessible to as many as possible. They went on and so on and so forth. So, there is sort of the view that this is quote unquote an imperialist attitude of being the world's custodian of stolen artifacts. But let me briefly look at what the said law that prevents the return of looted items states. So the law is a 1963 law, which is called the British Museum Act 1963, which is an act to alter the composition of the trustees of the British Museum to provide for the separation from the British Museum of the history and to make a new provision with respect to the regulation of the museums and their collections in place of that made by the British Museum Act 1753 and enactments amending or supplementing that act and for purposes connected with the assay matters, which received royal assent on the 10th of July 1963. So it covers the altered composition of British Museum trustees. It gives powers of, it highlights the powers of the trustees. It covers the keeping and inspection of the collections. It also covers the lending of objects, the disposal of objects in subsection 5, the staff, the reports by trustees, separation all from the Natural History Museum, transfers to other institutions, authorized repositories, and it also deals with things like some transitional provisions and matters, and how the trustees are going to be, how it's going to be managed, trustees' power, hold of meetings, etc., etc. But essentially, as the MP Rebello says, it deals with the keeping, so-called sort of safeguarding of the items at the museum. And now, these are to actually been missing as much as apparently 2,000 for a period of time, then that, I think that argument falls apart. And there seems to be sort of a collective view um, from all parties involved, at least from the outside, that the argument that they're safer here is no longer does no longer stand up to scrutiny. So that's just briefly um, the view covering the thefts or apparent loss of artifacts at the British Museum following the 1963 law, which is where they're caused to be changed by the chair of the All Parliamentary Reparations Group. And it's called the British Museum Act. So there we shall leave it on this episode of The Diary of a Lawyer. Thank you for listening. I'll speak again. Thank you. Bye.